This topic is political economy of China's growth story, a case of convergence or divergence. The speech is intended as my answer to the heated debate of whether China's growth story represents a uniquely Chinese model or the story can largely be explained within the general framework of the existing knowledge that we have. To begin my talk, I wouldn't say it's a lecture, it's a talk. It's I would, if time allows, leave plenty of time so that we have chances to be interactive, to answer whatever questions you have. To begin my talk, I would quote Thomas Kuhn, who is a philosopher of science. To be serious about our study of China, we should not just be descriptive, but more important than that, we should be analytical about what really is the cause for the growth of lack of it, of the Chinese story. Kuhn, when addressing the nature of scientific research, said, to be scientific, he said, we must have a puzzle. So for us to do research, we must have a puzzle for research. We must have a box of tools, a box of intellectual tools. Logic, mathematics are all intellectual tools. We must give structure to phenomena. The physical phenomena can be very complicated, and if you plunge into reality without an a priori analytical framework based on principles, the reality tends to confuse us. So we must give structure to phenomena. And based on that, we need to come up with hypotheses. And then you subject those hypotheses to empirical testing, either to validate the validity of your hypotheses or to falsify. Now, if we have systematic evidence to validate our hypotheses, then we gain in terms of level of confidence about the knowledge we learned so far. China is a very complicated country. So for us to understand China, I think Kuhn's words about the nature of scientific research is very illuminating. So I come back to his statement about the nature of scientific research. In other words, when we as scholars do serious study about what's going on in China, we need to listen to Kuhn's words. He's, by the way, again, he's a philosopher of science. To begin our story, we need to have another puzzle. Now, to generate a puzzle, one way to do that is I would review in a very sweeping way a history of 200 years, to look at China 200 years ago, so that we have a sense of where we were, where we are now, where we will be in China, especially when we are interested in the prospects of the challenges that China will face years down the road. 200 years ago, according to Agnes Madison, China had a population that was roughly 1/3 of the total population of the world. 200 years ago, roughly. You do not have to be very precise, but to have some structural figures. At the time, China was producing roughly 1/3 of the total GDP of the world. 1/3 of the world's population were producing roughly 1/3 of the total GDP of the world. All else being equal, China was performing normally, in other words. 100 years from then, China was producing something like 13% of the total GDP of the world. Before reforms and opening to the rest of the world, China's population was roughly 1/5 of the total population of the world, we were producing, guess how much? Less than 5% of the total GDP of the world. So, very simple, 1/5 of the world population were producing less than 5%. We were performing, in other words, extraordinarily bad way. After 30 years of reforms and opening up, we are now producing, with roughly 1/5 of the total population of the world, we are now producing roughly 10% of the total GDP of the world. In spite of the very dramatic story that is being watched, being told about the spectacular performance of Chinese economy. For us to have the same level of performance 200 years ago, we should be producing, with 1/5 of the world population, roughly 20% of the total GDP of the world. Then to use the normal distribution of the Gaussian normal distribution, then will be normal, or else be equal. That gives you a rough sense of where we were and how far we have traveled and what the future holds for China. In other words, for China to, now we say, national rejuvenation, renaissance. Now to achieve that, we are looking for another 10% of the total GDP of the world. When we achieve that, that won't say that we are doing extraordinarily well. Will be just normal. You sketch a Gaussian normal distribution, we're in the middle, not on one side of an outlier. Now my next job, with that background information, to explain what explains the very dramatic growth rates in the past 3 decades. I indicated my explanation will be an answer to the argument that says that the Chinese growth story is somewhat a Chinese model, and I won't accept that. My explanation would argue that within the confines of existing standard economic knowledge, the Chinese growth story can be explained adequately. Let me try to do that with 1, 2, 3. One is I'll come up with a very simple one formula. 2, that 2 would represent 2 frontiers of knowledge, or 2 lines of knowledge. 3, by that I would cite 3 great thinkers. Now to go to 1, I would argue that for growth, that is not applicable in the case of China, but applicable in all countries. Growth is a function of people multiplied by technology, given resources, given peace. Since in my title I indicated it's a political economy, so if we just say given resources, growth is a function of people multiplied by technology, sounds too purely economical. If I say given peace, because it's important, we tend to assume away the importance of the peace. Without a peace, then all cards will be off. So I would say 1, one simple equation. Growth is people multiplied by technology. And this could be applied not only to China, but also in the case of the United States, in the case of European countries, Russia, the same thing. And here, T. By T, I not only mean technology defined as hardware technology, but also institutional technology, such as rule of law, such as corporate governance, such as universities, the way you organize universities and inject your energy to push the frontier of knowledge is also a very complicated humanly created institutional technology. And if you look at the world, even though we all call universities, the governance structure is different. In the area of law, there is a huge difference between rule by law and the rule of law. These are human institutions. Incidentally, in the field of hard sciences, what we human beings can do most is to discover the laws that are already there. So it's to discover. But in social sciences, in institutional technology, in the field of institutional technology, yes, it's indeed that it's our human being that they create those technologies. So there, to sensitize that variable, I would sort of look at two dimensions of technology. Technology as hardware technology, and also technology of what I call institutional technology. I understand this afternoon we'll have sessions on foreign direct investment. And there, investment means not only capital, but also management. And the management is another type of institutional technology. And the two, I would say, if you look at all countries, including China, we're looking at two lines of frontier of technology. Out there, that line is represented by most advanced economies, such as the United States. And within the frontier of technology, what you can do is to increase allocative efficiency. And for emerging markets, they probably represent this line. And as long as you close the gap between the two and you put there into this equation, you see growth, very dramatic growth rates, holding all else being equal. Now, with one formula, two lines, let me cite three great thinkers. One is that holding this line of human knowledge constant, how to increase allocative efficiency. And that story is told by a great thinker called Adam Smith. To put a long story short, he argues if you have a central planning system, if you have a market-driven system, to move from a central planning system to a market system, and there you can gain enormously in terms of allocative efficiency. And he verbally, though not use sophisticated mathematic terms, demonstrated why a market system is good in terms of allocative efficiency. And his story was further demonstrated by Marshall by using more sophisticated mathematical terms to prove that market is efficient. Now, when I use the word prove, it is not sort of absolute terms. Given some conditions, when you compare that to other alternatives, that model is more efficient than others. Because ultimately, to prove with the human knowledge we have, we cannot be 100%. Even when we look at the body of knowledge called mathematics, we human beings so far haven't been able to complete the circle of mathematics. But given the knowledge we have high confidence that this model probably so far is the best compared to other models. So Adam Smith basically told us that story. The second great thinker I'm going to talk about is by the name of Joseph Schumpeter. His argument is that if you exhausted the allocative efficiency within the frontier of human knowledge, the ultimate driver for economic progress for all society is to continue to push forward the frontier of knowledge. So he used a very memorable phrase called creative destruction. Adam Smith said it's invisible hand, and Schumpeter said it's creative destruction. In other words, as you continue to move forward the knowledge frontier, growth continues, given resources, given peace. But it's easy for us to say, to learn some advanced technology, learn human knowledge. But for effective learning, usually we human beings need to have a platform to learn. Why? Because some of the sophisticated knowledge are not explicit. They are tacit. In other words, you can only learn by doing, like swimming. You have to swim so that you learn how to swim. And there I need to cite a third great thinker by the name of Lucas. And Lucas said learning actually is endogenous. If you look at the first model, people multiply by technology, but to represent the knowledge is ultimately personified by people. You have advanced technology, you have advanced people. So within that model, you have endogenous learning process. Now, what is the implication for the growth story of China? Even though with reform and opening, for Chinese to close the gap, we need to build a platform so that we have a better chance to learn advanced technologies globally. Not only hardware, but also software or institutional technology, as I would call it. And one effective vehicle with which to learn is FDI. FDI means foreign direct investment, different from portfolio investment, means it comes not only with the capital. Portfolio investment comes with the capital. You invest in stock markets, but you have no control over the management of firm. For capital to be qualified as foreign direct investment, in the case of the United States, if I remember correctly, the equity contribution need to go over the threshold of 15% for you to be qualified as foreign direct investment. Why 15%? If all other equity contributions are very scattered, and if you hold 15% of equity contribution, you have a strong voice in the management of the firm. Now, if you have a strong voice in the management of the firm, if you have technology, you have a better chance to transfer those technology into the operation of that firm. In the case of China, it is 25%. That level varies across countries, but the key is that you have to, for equity contribution, you have to go through a certain threshold, a significant threshold for you to be called foreign direct investment. So that we say foreign direct investment means not only capital, but also technology. Now, with 1, 2, 3, you basically generate 3 hypotheses. For the Chinese economy, to performed in the past 3 decades, the reform process, we call this reform and opening up. Reform means we have moved from a system of central planning system more towards a market system, though we still have a long way to go for us to be a mature market-driven economy. But the process is unquestionable. It has been moving from a planning system to a market-driven system, even though in the process we also experience the zigzags. And especially in the past few years, you can make an argument that we have been backpedaling from a more market-oriented system towards a more central planning system. That is why there has been heated debates about whether or not the state has been playing an increasingly important role. But if we look at the general trajectory of the 3 decades of reform, there is no question that we have been moving from a planning system to a market system. If that's true, what you can predict is an enormous gain in terms of allocative efficiency, given the frontier of knowledge hold constant. 1.3 billion people multiplied by an elevated level of allocative efficiency, and here you can predict growth. Now we say Chinese economy has been going through a process of reforms and opening up. What does opening up means? All else being equal, under globalization, we are better able to close the technological gap between ourselves and advanced economies. Usually, it is more difficult to push the frontier forward because you face enormous uncertainties. All else being equal, given the stock of knowledge, it is easier to catch up, all else being equal. So I guess thanks to globalization, we have gained enormously in terms of closing that gap, and especially in the area of hardware. I'm not so sure about institutional technologies. So hypothesis 1, there are gain of allocative efficiency. Hypothesis 2, there are gains in terms of closing of technology, and there you generate a very powerful technological variable, and you put those into that equation, you can explain the very dramatic growth rates. Now, Lucas' endogenous model, as I said, for some of the technologies, to learn some of the technologies, you have to have platforms. And there, China have been successful in terms of attracting foreign direct investment in the past 3 decades. And there you can see the indicators of effective learning in the process of catching up. So if you put all 3 hypotheses together, I would argue that can come a long way in explaining the very dramatic economic growth rates in China. So in other words, we do not need to look for additional or uniquely Chinese models to explain the very dramatic growth rates. By sort of systematically going through the stock of knowledge we already have, we can come a long way. We can come a long way to explain the very dramatic economic growth in China. I say political economy. To reform a central planning system, you need to reduce the power, the political power. So this is not a purely economic matter. It has to be a political, an issue of political economy. And to open up, it is also in a political economy. To understand that, we can sort of appreciate the difficulty of that problem by just looking at the case of North Korea. To open up is very difficult, and you must have strong political determination to open up. So to explain the growth rates, it will be very misleading for us just to look at the economic dimensions. We need also to look at the political dimensions. And further down the road, if China wants to continue to learn institutional technologies, then it has to be a case of political economy, because you have to further recalibrate the role of the state vis-a-vis the role of the market. And in existing scholarly literature, we tend to use the word institution economics, but institutional economics, the way I look at that is in a literature of a political economy issue, because there you need to be constantly be looking for the line between hierarchy, power, and the market as the horizontal institution. But I save that for later part of my presentation. So to sum up, if we combine all three hypotheses, allocative efficiency, frontier of knowledge, then effective learning, that can go a long way to explain the very dramatic growth of China. And for the last part, I would say something about the prospects and the challenge that United States and also China face, because the organizers of this conference also want me to address on the China-US relations. Indicated by this, you see the relationship between China and the United States. If the very frontier of technology is represented by most advanced economies like the United States, and this line represented by emerging markets like China, in a very fundamental way, you can see the necessity of the interface, especially on the part of China, with advanced economies, so that their growth rates can continue, given peace, given resources. But for the last part of my presentation, I will also talk about the challenges that we face. Now, a few comments of the United States. You use the same equation, people multiply by technology. The challenge of the United States faces is this. Now that you have finished the process of industrialization, what is the additional sources of productivity increase in post-industrialized era? Previously, we've been told three stories. One is IT. All else being equal, if you employ IT, can you gain in terms of productivity? The short answer is simple, yes. But the long answer is very complicated to an extent. In spite of all the research we have done, we do not have good answers. But with the bubble of the burst of the bubble of the Nasdaq, and with the benefit of hindsight, we now realized that story has been exaggerated. So all else being equal, there will be a process of deleveraging. The second story that we've been told about additional sources of productivity increase is service industry, high-ended service industry, banking, legal service, accounting, rating firms. Now, if you are to configure factors of production on a global basis, all else being equal, will you gain efficiency? The short answer is yes. But the long answer is to what extent? We do not have good answers to that. Now, with the financial crisis, with the benefits of hindsight, we also now know that story has also been exaggerated. A process of deleveraging. And the third story that we've been told is about the beauties of life science. But the way I look at life science is, it is easy for specific firms or pharmaceutical firms to be specific to make a lot of money. But if you have the wherewithal so that our life can continue and continue, what is the implication for the economy as a whole? We're not so sure. But in any case, that story won't help us in terms of immediate or intermediate terms. Long term, probably we have time to figure that out. Now, with the three pillars no longer have the power that we've told they have the power, there is no question the United States will have to go through a very painful process of deleveraging. It is not that the United States is not doing well. And here, let me use an analogy. United States has already jumped over the height of, say, 2.2 meters, and you want to go higher. You tried with external stimulus, in other words. IT, service industry, high-end service industry, life science.